Right, we're rolling. On this podcast, we'll be talking about different areas of business and all things marketing. My name is Dave Doyle.
And I'm Dave Alton. This is Social Antics, another marketing podcast.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 5 of Social Antics, another marketing podcast. My own name is Dave Doyle and I'm joined here by Dave Alton. Weird week, Dave.
Back in fucking lockdown.
Again
We're back in lockdown.
6 weeks to go.
Oh, it's crazy. Absolutely crazy. And there's no, like people are talking about Christmas then as well. Like the word from the government is that you're going to go from 5 back to at most 3, which in the context of Christmas means 15 people sitting outside a pub in Ireland, like in Spain maybe, like, but not in Ireland. No. So I know, look, tis rough. Like I was talking to, like, obviously we'd work with a lot of local businesses and know a lot of local business owners and stuff like that, and like a few of them there now were saying that, like, we were given the news and I had to let go of 20 staff, just like that. Like, do you know what I mean? Everyone's back on the pub payment and all the rest of it. So no, it is. It's a wild world we live in.
It's back to square one. And where we're based anyway, for anyone that's not listening in Cork, what I felt was terrible was we got the news that the lockdown was going to happen, and what happened the next morning? A flood hit Cork and loads of businesses absolutely destroyed.
Oh, it was 2020, like the worst year ever.
2 days to make a bit of sales before lockdown, and unfortunately hearts go out to a lot of businesses that might not have been able to get open for the last few days. But
you can't, like, ultimately, like, I mean, it's not as simple as just closing for a day. Like, I mean, stock replenishment out the window, cleaning costs, all the like, and then just, I think what people often, they look at the economic side of this, but the sheer emotional impact that it must have on business owners. Like, if you've been trying for this year, given how tumultuous it has been, and then all of a sudden you're closed again, and then you're hit with a flood and more bills and bills and bills, and your cash flow must be devastated. No, I don't. I mean, look, fair play to local businesses for, again, keeping the economy going, but it must be devastatingly tough at the moment.
I suppose anyone, even for ourselves, like anyone that we can help out or give a bit of advice to, feel free to get in touch with us over the next couple of weeks if you're looking at your marketing or business strategy. We go into the first part anyway. So any news popping up, Dave?
I suppose the first one, which I just thought was, it's an interesting move, but Facebook have launched a dating platform, which I thought was really. How did you spot it? I saw it popped up. I follow the Irish Examiner. It wasn't an ad. They didn't realise how desperate and lonely I am. But I just think it's actually fascinating. So if you look at dating apps and the way they've evolved over time, like, you started with kind of eHarmony, which is web based, and you inputted all your information. Then you had Tinder, which is based on entirely based on looks. Essentially, it was quick decision making. Again, it was almost the Snapchat like kind of idea, getting that dopamine hit. Yes, no. This person likes me, and so on and so forth. Then you have Bumble, which kind of looked at things a little bit differently, in so much as they let the female ask first, because again, Tinder kind of became a bit creepy in terms of the culture that was surrounding Tinder, which is basically kind of writing culture basically. And now Facebook have brought out a dating app. Now, I suppose what I think is fascinating about this is that if you go back to the very, very start, eHarmony. By the way, if you listen, I don't have an eHarmony account, but I know how it works. So you input all your information. I like cats, I like dogs, I like parachuting, whatever you're into, and so on and so forth. With Facebook, you don't need to do that.
It's already
there. They have all of your data, and not even the stuff that you put out in terms of your profile photo, in terms of your age and your interests and what you like. But like, they know, like, are you into blondes and brunettes? Are you into bald blokes like myself? Or are you into fellas with dreadlocks? Do you know what I mean? They know your history because you put it all up on Facebook. Who do you hang around with most? Who do you post your photos in most?
What kind of food do you like? Everything. Yeah.
All of that kind of stuff. So does it present a huge opportunity for advertisers as well, maybe, in terms of, if you, again, I don't know, is it matching or whatever way they do the matching or the hookups? Is that then, do you get a notification saying this restaurant is doing a deal on this particular day or something like that?
But even right now, even before this is even launched, you can target people that are single, that are interested. It's already kind of, the capabilities of that is nearly already there. I suppose it's just going to be a little bit stronger
it's
now.
It's Tinder on acid, basically, because now you're looking at people. Again, you're probably, I don't know exactly how this works, but you have the you have the situation whereby obviously you're going to make a decision based on how someone looks in terms of your immediate kind of introduction to that person, like any kind of dating platform. But you would imagine with the amount of data that Facebook have that it's going to be pretty close in terms of this person should be a relatively close match for you based on your personality types, based on your behaviour, based on where you go, based on where you visit, based on your previous dating habits. It's kind of creepy. It's bordering on the, again, I hate like society's thing at the moment is that, oh, isn't it a bit like Black Mirror? I hate when people say that, but I'm going to say it. It's a bit like Black Mirror.
But even if you look back, going back to the film, I think we mentioned here before, The Social Network, where it's looking back into the days of creation of Facebook, like it was almost going down that path nearly at, if you watch the film version of it, like, it was nearly going down that path of maybe creating a dating profile.
I think the main I think one of the main things that that was almost the hook, we often call it when we're talking about apps, the thing that keeps people coming back, is that they had the relationship status, which is something that was never on any other platform previously. And it was, again, where are you sitting in class, who are you hanging around with, that was the social profile that was online. And it was back, like, I mean, look, we know how digital technology works. Technology and digital identities that are performed, shall we say, on social media, they're ultimately augmented because they're a part of you, which is just reflected on a digital platform. So, no, interesting in terms of again how Facebook started, and I suppose they've come full circle. But it'll be interesting for advertising opportunities. I think that's the other thing we kind of talked about before, about kind of Facebook they've jumped into so many different areas and tried out so many different tools that it might work, it might not. Some people might never even hear of this, like, it might not even launch anywhere big, but definitely interesting to keep it's all over Europe apparently. But no, you are right. Facebook have this kind of strategy where they throw so much stuff at a wall, and some of it works, some of it doesn't. Like the stories hasn't been a hit at all. Now obviously they own Instagram as well, so it doesn't necessarily make any difference. But they've done a few stuff over the years which hasn't really worked at all. But again, will this work? Again, it comes down to what people use it for.
And you also probably have to think about the age profile that are going to be using Facebook,
which will be older.
So are they going to be using this as a dating platform, I suppose? That
as opposed to a hookup app, like,
is it the right
it's interesting
platform for them, like,
it could be. It's interesting.
You've already touched on it there about stories. The news that caught my eye this week, which only launched yesterday, probably a couple of days by the time this podcast comes out, but once again another platform trying some new tools out. So LinkedIn launched stories worldwide, basically as an Instagram style format where they're bringing out stories using photos, videos up to 20 seconds, offering a more casual, I suppose, and immediate way to share content, viewable for 24 hours, same as the other platforms. It's basically capitalizing now on the popularity that video has caused over the last few years, really, like, members and brands are going to have the ability to incorporate and customize work stickers in stories. So I think they're kind of looking at a way of incorporating employees in your groups. They kind of have that big that you can say you work for this company and all that anyway, but they're bringing in like moment of the day and all this kind of stuff like into stickers. So taking some of the stickers maybe from Instagram and more down the route of business and internal. And
it's a strange one. Like, I mean, it is something that has been a cultural phenomenon over the last particularly on social media and particularly with LinkedIn, where work and where you work is now very much part of your social identity, even as much as your work one.
Businesses are almost annoyed if you don't have that you work for them on LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's very strange. Like, I mean, the employees are a fundamental part of the business's brand, and then similarly the business's brand that you work for is very, very important to you. And again that's why a lot of these companies, like, you see it there now with a lot of the tech startups, shall we say, and again, they don't pay you that well, but you get to sit in a beanbag and, do you know what I mean, all this kind of stuff. Do you know what I mean? And it's all part of it, like that.
I'm sitting on a beanbag at home at the moment.
And that's what it is. And I think that's what's crucially important. Like, I remember working for a company a few years ago, and they were really, really struggling to hire. They were offering good wage and all that for programmers. And I said to them, if you go onto your Facebook feed, go onto your website, and it was sterile. It was all about they were selling SaaS software for whatever it was. It doesn't make a difference. But then I was saying, go on to Blizzard, go on to teamwork.com, go on to any of the gaming companies. And again, it was the beanbags, the fridge full of drink, it was the work nights out, the barbecues, the big spaces, the slides.
And not stock imagery, it was actually staff that were working there enjoying themselves.
Exactly, yeah. And I think and particularly for young people now, and it's one of the phenomenon that I think is going to emerge from this work from home thing. Like, young people like going to work if it is a nice place to work, because it's a social place. because a lot of younger people, or even we say it was from the early 20s upwards, a lot of people don't own their own home at the moment. So therefore they want to go to a place where they have a nice desk, they have an office, they can meet people, because they don't like working in, again, the place where they're sleeping 3 meters away from where they're actually working. So that whole element is going to become even more important, which is where recruiting talent and promoting what it's like to work in a place and work culture is going to become really, really important for businesses, I think. And this idea of the LinkedIn stories, I think, filters into how they could communicate that in a really, really effective way.
I think LinkedIn is a fantastic platform, and it's only gotten better over the last couple of years. The only thing I don't want this to see is some LinkedIn trying to be something it's not. I don't want it to go too far down the almost, I don't know the way of saying it, probably the personalization route. I think they should, any marketers or managers using, or business owners using LinkedIn or using LinkedIn stories should keep it creative, yes, but remember the platform that they're on, I suppose.
It's funny, but I think B2B is almost an uncracked nugget in many ways in terms of marketing and unlocking marketing capability. Like the majority of jobs in marketing is in B2B, it's not in B2C. B2C is a tough industry to make it as a marketer. If you take your standard B2B, again, SaaS company to a healthcare provider to a factory to manufacturer, you're probably selling one unit for 50,000 euros, and you're selling into, it's more of a sales process. Whereas with marketing, particularly in consumer packaged goods industry, it's a mass market, so branding becomes really, really important. But I think I find people or marketers are starting to realize that when you're selling even to a business or you're selling to another salesperson, you're still selling to a person. So the idea of doing something really, really creative with your product, and again going down that storytelling route, I think is going to become more important in a B2B world. So just to give you an example of this, an IBM company, and I think it was IBM, they released, it was a mini documentary, 15 minutes long, where it was basically the anatomy of a hack. So if you look at the anatomy of a hack in terms of how it works, I actually didn't know how you would actually hack an organization. Was this documentary showed it, and it was just at the very, very end that they showed how their system would prevent this from happening. So it was actually an interesting piece of content in and of itself, and I didn't feel like I was being constantly sold to. And that's where B2B, I think, kind of falls down a lot, is that it is very, very salesy still, and they don't look at the creativity behind how can I promote my product and the differentiation of my product relative to my competitors in a really, really interesting and thoughtful way.
So what you're saying there lines in with Tom Pepper, Head of Marketing Solutions UK, Ireland and Israel, came out and said that we believe stories can become an integral part of brands' communication strategies, and my advice to any brands looking to experiment with stories is just do it. A great thing about stories is that they don't have to be slick or overproduced, and as long as they are authentic and match your brand and audience, they will hopefully be successful for you. I think definitely, as you said there, looking at who your audience is and a new way of tapping into them, I suppose. I've heard that the stories, they might be quite clunky and a bit ugly to use. They wouldn't be as slick maybe as stories on Instagram or Reels, but I suppose we have to kind of see what way
they need to fix that. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's LinkedIn, if it's B2B or whatever. Again, consumers aren't going to engage with a clunky experience. They just won't.
Yeah, as I said, I think it's a great platform, but I just wanted to LinkedIn to stay.
Yeah, I'm not sure it is a good platform. Actually, I'd kind of disagree with you there. I don't. To me, again,
it's too early to be arguing.
I know, yeah, probably. But to me, again, it's too, there's people and they post stuff up on LinkedIn, and I know them, and I'm like, why do you turn into such a bullshitter on LinkedIn? Why are you just do you know what I mean? You're a renegade, and you're presenting this absolutely false persona of yourself. Oh, look, this would be a really interesting ebook for all of my connections to download. It's come on, man.
Social media in general,
Oh no, it's all lies, but I think you can see what you'd like for your social self, whereas when you're talking about your business or your work self, it's just a bit kind of, are you kind of doing it all for the man then, do you know what I mean? So I think with LinkedIn as well, I think their business model is phenomenal, by the way. It's better than all the other social media networks in that Facebook, all of their revenue comes from advertising. With LinkedIn, you've got some of their money coming from the recruiters, you've got some of it coming from sales in terms of Sales Navigator, and then you've got your marketing teams and your advertising. So that split in terms of our portfolio of different revenue sources means that they have a really, really, really effective business model. So no, I like LinkedIn as a business, but as a platform, I just feel it's a little bit sterile, I think. But it is getting better.
What is your favourite platform?
Twitter.
Twitter.
Or by a distance. News, headlines, quick. I know what's going on. Scroll through it. Probably the first thing that I check in the morning. It's just everything's quick. It's instantaneous. I'm not one for, again, really discussions or conversations on Twitter. I don't really do it. I don't engage in debates or anything like that. But as a kind of an information source, I think it's really, really good. And and dancing dogs as well. You have to love dancing dogs. TikTok's good for that as well, to be fair.
So yeah, actually the next news topic now actually leads us nicely into today's focus topic, which is going to be around the future of digital advertising. And to me, the next crowd, the next brand are probably up there with one of the world's top advertising companies. Well, not companies, but brands that get involved in advertising, and that's Guinness. And they've just announced a new alcohol-free stout. Dave, what's your thoughts on alcohol-free beer? I suppose
wouldn't be a fan of the alcohol. I had it once and I was never so hungover afterwards. It was absolutely brutal.
Given to you by mistake.
Given to you by mistake, yeah. To be fair, like a few of my buddies now would, let's say they were driving or whatever the story is. I was going to say if any of them were like playing a match or something, but no, they're not. That's not that type of crew. Watching a match, yeah. But no, in fairness, like it's like some of them have started drinking alcohol free. Usually they might get a Coke or something like that. Whereas now they would drink the alcohol free beer.
I do. So like normally I'm driving, so normally I would get Heineken Zero, and you would notice a bit of the taste difference, but I think it's up there with them, like, you know, it really is in terms of taste. So like Guinness and the team now in St James's Gate have been very creative they've been on this for 4 years, and I think personally over the last few years they've actually been very creative with coming out with new brews and new beers, and you know, the porterhouse beer and all this kind of stuff. They've been very creative, I think.
They're good at latching on the Hop House 13 was a complete cannibalization of craft breweries at the time. Do you know what I mean? They do the and again, look, Guinness are good at this. Guinness know that they're not going to be a craft brewery, so therefore they look at what's going on in the margins, what are the trends, and then how can we take a portion of that market, or at the very least stop them taking a portion of that market from us.
I think one of my favourite adverts that they ever done was probably actually around the time that they were probably starting this, I would say now thinking back, but when they came up with the whole Guinness Clear campaign with the I thought that was genius, absolutely genius. So the brewers are claiming that this is boasting the same beautiful smooth taste. They're using the same ingredients, which is water, barley, hops, yeast, but obviously removing the alcohol through cold filtration method.
A car without petrol. Pointless, absolutely pointless. Goodness sake.
Fair enough. So anyway, a couple of stats around it, I suppose. Non-alcoholic, as you already said, look, it's definitely the way things are going. And Heineken sales of its own brand beer last year grew 8.3% in 2019, obviously because of Heineken Zero. And that's after giving them the best performance in revenue in over 10 years. And it actually rose their whole revenue by 6.4%.
But I think actually is a big help here. And so when you're talking about alcohol advertising, there's something which they call the final 3 feet, which is basically when you're at the bar counter and you've got your taps in front of you and you can see the fridge and so on and so forth. And that is when that's the most valuable space for an advertiser. So you'd often hear, again, I have buddies who work in pubs and they'd say, a Guinness rep would come in and say, look, I'll give you an extra keg if you throw the Heineken tap down the fucking other end of the bar. Like,
I've worked in bars for years, and Coke were one of the best for it. Coca-Cola, they would come in and they would say, oh, we're bringing the top lads around next week, is there any chance that you can fill up the bar? And you come in, you'd swear the whole place was sponsored by Coca-Cola. Like, it was literally everywhere, and I'm like, it's such a false sense that these people are getting of the bars, that their brand is absolutely everywhere in every bar.
Of course,
I'd hate to be the market manager coming in and seeing it.
But it's interesting though. So with that, what I've seen, so previously, if you looked at Heineken when they released first, and Carlsberg, there was a few other non-alcoholic Polliners and all those kind of ones, but they were all bottles.
Yeah.
And it was very, very distinct that you were drinking a non-alcoholic beer. Now when people are drinking non-alcoholic pints, it's actually not that you can't distinguish. Like, the logos are the same, and they're mixing and matching the glasses now as well between the alcohol free and the normal drink, so no one actually knows. So that stigma, shall we say, is kind of being subtly removed by just kind of not being able to tell what's going on. I think it, like in society in general anyway, like before, like I mean, if I was a young fella now and I started drinking me alcohol-free beer, me buddies would kind of have their way with me, kind of a thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, whereas now one of the biggest growing cohorts of non-alcoholic products is younger consumers, because again they're more health conscious and so on and so forth, and putting up fucking stories of themselves on Instagram looking fucking whatever ripped and all the rest of it. Going to the gym, for our listeners, no. But I think again it is a growing market. It's the way it's going, and I think what will be even more interesting is in a non-COVID world, in a COVID world, when COVID starts to filter out again, where bars are more about sitting down as opposed to kind of going on the tear. I think again that's a market that could be very, very lucrative.
Well, you're going to have people back out eating, and someone's going to have to drive more than likely.
Yeah,
like, so
exactly.
I do think, as you said, the stigma has gone out of it. Like, you know, it's actually kind of acceptable to sit there and drink a Heineken Zero or Guinness Zero now, or, you know, Carlsberg have their own as well. So it's very, very interesting. But I have another stat here that from Global Market Insight. So beer itself, the beer market is $600 billion worth. But according to Global Market Insights, they're saying that the sales of non-alcoholic beer is expected to surpass $25 billion by 2024. Like, which is
it's a big jump.
It's
a big jump.
Serious share of the market. Is that all for the news for this week?
I just want to talk about my favourite Guinness story. Can I talk about my favourite Guinness story, given that we're talking about Guinness? So people story time with Dave. It's a new segment of the show. So during the fighting in 1916, the Republic of Ireland, trucks used by Guinness were converted into improvised armoured fighting vehicles by the British Army and used against the Republican forces. And to this day, it is not fully known whether those vehicles were donated by Guinness or whether they were demanded by the British Army from Guinness. So Guinness being the most Irish brand in the world, gunning down our own, I'm not so sure. I'm looking forward to the legal letter of Diageo there during the week.
We've consulted enough brands in every other episode now.
But it is actually very, very interesting that you have a story like that, and again filtering into what we're going to be talking about in a minute in terms of advertising, how you can weave a narrative around your brand over a long period of time. And there's a lot of brands out there with, again, very, very checkered pasts and histories. Like, again, I've said it before, Volkswagen was a creation of the Nazis, so was Hugo Boss. Guinness involved in this behaviour with the British Army, even though they're a very, very Irish brand. So it's very interesting over time how narratives can be transformed in terms of people's opinion towards advertisers and brands and so on and so forth.
There you go. Do you want to actually introduce what we're going to talk about this week?
Yeah, so I suppose this week's focus topic, and again, it's more of a, I suppose it's not what's going on at the moment, but it's more of a kind of a little bit of predictions going on, but it's talking about where the digital advertising market could potentially be going into the future. What's going on a little bit now, but what are the things that businesses, brand owners are going to have to be conscious of in the future when they're looking at advertising spend? I'd always approach, like, I mean, for me, and I know you kind of disagree with me on this, but as far as I'm concerned, social media is pay to play. Okay. Very little that you can do organically. Yes, you can reach a certain audience, but I think that's really much a bubble. You will have a core following, or you'll have a core brand community who your content constantly goes out to. But ultimately, I think if you want to grow your audience and target specific people even within that audience, then you have to use the tools that are available to you, and unfortunately that means pay to play.
I do agree. I do totally agree with you. I suppose when I come at it slightly different is I hate when businesses go straight into paying for it and don't look at that organic or building up the actual, we talked about before, the whole actual use of social media and actually the way of using it, and that's I suppose what I come at it from a different angle. No,
and look, brand building is crucially important, but I think what's really so how all these things all evolve over time, right? So when brands started using Facebook first, the brands who started using Facebook when it was primarily just organic created millions of euros for themselves in terms of valuation, in terms of sales, because they were the first ones on it. The algorithm was built in such a way that if you reached a large audience, which you would because the algorithm was built that way, on social media, it would increase your sales. All of a sudden, brand owners, brand managers start realizing, okay, this social media stuff actually works. And then as the algorithm diminishes your organic reach, you all of a sudden have to substitute that reach with paid advertising. So no, I think before, absolutely 100%, and even now I would agree with you, brands still do have to put a lot of content out on social media, and I'm not saying it doesn't work, but I'm saying the impact that it has relative to paid advertising is now a lot smaller, particularly in the initial phases and trying to building that content up over time. Yes, there is obviously stories of influencers and brands who got a massive following over a short period of time, but those are few and far in between. Overall, it's very, very difficult to grow a brand now on social media without using paid tools.
When you're talking about advertising there on social, we kind of talked about it already a little bit. Like, Facebook is probably the king when it comes to online advertising.
Oh no, they're the only game in town when it comes to creative. Google is the only game in town when it comes to search. Yeah. But ultimately, when it comes to kind of creative digital advertising, it's all Google.
Yeah.
Or it's all Facebook. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you can, like the next probably for me personally, the next would be definitely Instagram. There is still quite a good advertising platform there.
Well, it's the same company.
I've used Twitter once or twice. I think
it's terrible. It's awful.
It's not great. Like, but then they say that because there's not a massive amount of ads being used or businesses being used, there is quite a good reach if you can do it properly. And then when you look at the other ones, then like down LinkedIn, I haven't experimented a massive amount with it, but I do think there is quite a good bit in there that you can use. But I think more so from a sales point of advert, instead of actually adverts. There's more of a sales kind of.
Yeah, so to go through some stuff that you said there. So Twitter, and I've used it a few times in campaigns. What I find with Twitter is that it's more effective in terms of kind of guaranteeing you sales because it's less saturated, like you said. But the cost per click or the cost per acquisition or cost per sale, whatever metric you're using depending on your business, I find is a lot higher. Yeah. So you're getting your reach, but not as many people click on ads on Twitter for whatever reason. It's the search behavior. On Facebook, you reach a much wider audience if we're to believe the figures that we're getting from Facebook in terms of campaign reach.
Why wouldn't you believe
Why wouldn't I? Because they've never gotten them wrong before, never. So your cost per click ends up being a lot less, but then you have to spend a lot more to get your volume sale out.
But then the other side of it is a lot of people don't know how to advertise properly on Facebook.
That's also true.
Promote now or boost now button. People go straight to that.
Awful button to boost.
It's basically like don't push the red button. Like it's there, and anyone that doesn't know how to use Facebook advertising platform correctly, they'll go straight to it, and they're wasting their money.
And it is an easier one to use. Like if you're going to use Facebook correctly in terms of its advertising potential, again, you've got to embed your Facebook pixel in all your pages, set up your retargeting options, monitoring it every day in terms of not only where are my clicks coming from, but where are my impressions coming from. And then if I'm getting a load of impressions from a certain cohort but the clicks there are quite low, or if the cost per acquisition is quite high, then I need to rejig my actual target. So like there's a huge science. I mean, that's even a dumbed down version of it, but there's a huge science behind how we use these platforms. And again, the boost button eliminates that fear almost of what it is.
It's a lot easier for novices that just come on for the first time. But I think if anyone starts experimenting, you're talking there all about for a lot of maybe small businesses that are listening to this that don't understand the acquisition rates and your cost per clicks and all this kind of stuff, there is simplified versions of it, and I do think Facebook have it laid out very, very well in terms of a follow through. It's basically nearly paint by numbers almost. But I do think in terms of building an audience, building a few more followers, it's not all about followers, it's about engagement rate, but driving traffic maybe to your website or to an e-commerce platform or wherever you want to drive them to, it is quite good for that, I think.
And another thing that is kind of discounted, I think, because the measurement element is quite difficult, but if you're selling, a lot of people say, well, it's Facebook and it's great because you can measure your cost per acquisition. You can say, I spent this amount on this campaign, this amount of people saw it, this amount of people clicked on it, this amount of people bought it, these are all the costs and the breakdowns and stuff like that. But it's a lot harder to do that if you're selling a physical retail product which isn't e-commerce enabled. And I think a lot of brands kind of get a bit intimidated by that and discount that because it comes back to the classic, what is the return on investment for your advertising? Now, I think it's incredible the amount of old school advertisers who they look for measurement on everything. And I mean in terms of acquisition, cost per click, and these are the same guys who are using newspapers and all this.
Nothing can be done without a return on investment, basically.
Oh, exactly. And again, you can measure a lot, but you can't tangibly measure everything. But there are certain tactics that you can use to measure the impact of digital in a real world as well. So like with some organizations, now what you would do is that you would target a certain geographical area, for example, or a certain radius around a particular store, and then based on the content that you're putting out to those different regions, do a regression analysis, for example, on the amount of impressions or the amount of clicks or the amount of video views or completion rates relative to your sales of that particular product versus a region that didn't have that ad running. Do you know what I mean? So there's other mechanisms that you can use to actually understand how digital advertising works in terms of generating real world sales.
But I think what's probably even better for small businesses is there's a lot of tools in the back of Facebook that they don't realize they've even access to. So there is this whole area of insights that is giving you a full breakdown of your pages, who likes it, your demographics, your geographics, whatever it is, where they are, who likes it. It even gives you, there's even a nice one I think for, which is very good for takeaways or for restaurants, is you can see the type of consumer that is passing your door.
Yeah.
You can, it's based on your location.
Yeah.
You can see what age, roughly what age they are, gender they are. It'll give you some of that kind of information for literally who's passing your door. And then why wouldn't you target that? If you're looking for the footfall, why wouldn't you target them?
No, I mean, look, it all filters into it. Like, I mean, the amount of data. I mean, look, the list. Some of our listeners will know this, like particularly the ones who run businesses and stuff like that. But the little things that you do when you're looking to pick a store and where you actually and how you actually advertise from that store, even simple things like if you have a store on the side of the footpath where the sun is shining or the side of the road where the sun is shining, your sales are probably, or your footfall is probably going to go up by about 30%. So small little things like that are just really important. And again, taking that old school thought and then using digital tools and platforms to apply it to those old school kind of scenarios, I think can be really effective. And it's not something that we talk about or we do that often.
I think there has to be a nice blend of both. I think you have to take the tools that you have on offer, and looking in, as I already said, looking into your insights and seeing who actually follows your page, but also then, as you said, using what we do as marketers in terms of day-to-day stuff. That kind of gut feeling you have as a marketer to what might work and might not work, and whether that comes into what type of content you use, or what type of, whether it's pictures or videos, or looking down the road at what kind of maybe trends are coming down the road.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, like, again, what we are talking about here in a lot of cases is the vanity metrics.
Yeah.
Which don't really result in anything. Like, I mean, you can apply it to things like brand equity and stuff like that, or if you're doing a funding round, if you're a startup, it helps in those if you have got an audience. But ultimately, I think it does need to come down to ultimately how much revenue are you generating via your digital channels. So, I suppose in terms of the future of digital advertising, then is there anything that you've seen recently that you think might be okay, not that you've even seen, but anything that you see in terms of a changing trend or what might happen in the future in terms of how we use digital advertising products to reach consumers?
We kind of talked about it a little bit before about, especially since COVID kicked in, for smaller businesses, I suppose, as well. A lot of the bigger ones would already be utilising it, but the whole area of getting your products online. It's not just a physical store anymore. So looking at platforms like, you would have a good bit of experience around Amazon, and looking at how do I get my products selling, not just physically in a store, but can I get them selling online, and look, some businesses are thinking, Jesus, my products won't sell online, whether it's a fresh food product, or whether it's an ambient food product, or whether it's a physical piece of clothing, or whatever it is. There is a way around a lot of this to get them sold online. And I think nowadays with COVID here, you have to be a little bit creative in how or what platforms you use, I suppose, to get those products
100%.
sold.
I think, they're looked at the fastest growing e-commerce company in the world at the moment, with the exception of Amazon. But anyone who's looking to, again, kind of pivot their business into an online world, look at Shopify.
Yeah.
And don't just look at the Shopify e-commerce platform, look at their EPOS system as well. So everything is linked.
Yeah.
You can do your stock takes. If someone buys something online, it immediately is taken off your stock list. You can do credit notes, all the kind of things that you would do in your normal retail environment, but taking that then and applying it to digital content, an incredibly powerful tool. And shop around as well, it's important. Like if you look at Shopify, one of the things that a lot of businesses use is Shopify payments. Shopify payments is really, really expensive in terms of your transaction cost. So again, shop around with your local bank and see if you can get a better transaction rate there. But in terms of a platform, in terms of its capabilities, it's kind of a beta in many ways, in that everything is just there. There's very little customization that you can do with Shopify, unless you're your developer and you build on the platform. But that's all you kind of need as a small business owner, I think, is just that mechanism to reach customers, manage your stock, and do it in a way that doesn't completely interfere with your
I think
with your
that's an
business.
important one you said there, because I was dealing with a local business recently that was selling online, and they just put it up on, they were using, we'll come to it maybe in a minute, but they were just using Facebook, the shop on Facebook, they were using tagging the products through Instagram, but they weren't managing the physical stock that was coming through and the orders that were coming through. And as you said there about integrating maybe a system, it might sound expensive, but it is actually worth it, because you don't want to piss your customers off. You're going to get in loads of orders, and next thing you have no stock, and you have those orders, so whether you have to ring them and do a refund, or you have to give people their money, give their money back, or tell them they're going to be a few weeks waiting. It's just going to annoy customers and not want them to buy from you in the future.
And customer experience would be a big thing for you as well.
Definitely,
in terms of excellence, like in terms of repeat customers and so on and so forth. Look, I think in business, the rule that I would always use is that it's always cheaper to keep a customer than to acquire a new one.
Oh yeah,
and repeat sales are just their goal to every business. They're so important.
Yeah.
I think one thing that you mentioned there, which I think is interesting, and it's a good thing for businesses, but it's also a bad thing for businesses. You mentioned Amazon, and we've done episodes in the past where I've ranted about Amazon and they've got too much control. Roughly 50% of the e-commerce market, well, between 35 and 50% depending on what metrics you look at, of the e-commerce market in the United States. And I think what's interesting about Amazon is that, do they offer a marketplace to small businesses? Yes, they do. Because things are more based on product searches rather than brand searches. As in, if you are Jenny's clothing store and you're a boutique and you're selling dresses or whatever, then it's about the dress. It's not necessarily about your boutique's brand necessarily. Yeah. So it gives you access to that marketplace where brand isn't as important essentially. But I think where there's a cannibalization there in terms of SMEs and even multinational business as well, is that you've seen, particularly over the last, I would say maybe 8 years, a massive increase in the amount of Amazon own brand products. And that's all based on the data. Yeah. So if you've got a huge amount of transactions going through Amazon can spot straight away what are the high selling items, what's moving, where can we have a margin here, undercut the competitors. And of course, again, Amazon own the marketplace, they own the channel. So if you type in dresses or you type in couches, because I know they've got an own brand furniture wing in Amazon, if you type in couches, the first one that's going to come up is going to be Amazon, because they control the marketplace. So again, there's that anti-competition piece there as well. So it's an opportunity for retailers, but it's also looking to the future. It could be a detriment to retailers as well, in terms of it gives you access to a global audience, but the global audience is kind of owned by Amazon. I think even beyond that then as well, if we look at how that's even going to progress further. So at the moment, again, like I said, someone will type in couches into Amazon, and Amazon comes up at the top, shall we say, or near the top. I think what's even more kind of, it's not insidious, I mean it's genius business strategy, but with the growth of voice,
here we go.
You go, Alexa, exactly, but if you go, Alexa, I want batteries,
Alexa will order you batteries, but
they're going to be Amazon batteries. Yes. And you won't, and in front of a screen you'll probably scroll, you'll do a little bit of search. If you're doing just a consumer packaged good, cheap product, you're going to ask for batteries. You're not even going to think of what brand you want. So therefore, Amazon is going to be the one.
Yeah, you're as you said, you've no brand, you've no control over what brand you're even looking for. It's just going to get it out. I think voice, look, it's very, very interesting. It's very, very powerful. Personally, me, I'm not sure about you, but me personally, I haven't gotten into it. Don't have an Alexa. Don't have Hey Google in the corner. Thankfully nothing turned on there on the computer. But no, I think it's definitely, it's coming into homes a lot more. But you would have definitely experience on how you might use that in a shopping, maybe shopping setting. Yeah,
it's not absolutely clear. Like, I mean, there's going to be essentially SEO for voice in a lot of cases. Like even a small thing. Like, I mean, if you look at SEO in terms of your YouTube videos, one of the tricks that you should do is that talk about what you're speaking about specifically in terms of keywords at the beginning of the video, because that's what they're going to pick out in terms of what you say, and that helps you in terms of your ranking and stuff like that. So again, how all these things impact upon marketers and how we actually go about building SEO capability is going to be really, really interesting. But again, it's an opportunity, but it also could be cannibalizing for local brands. And look, I mean, the power of Amazon is just phenomenal. Like, I mean, the one thing that I find about them at the moment, which is just completely fascinating, is this idea of 0-click ordering, where again, just based on data, if you're a Prime customer, and again we said in a previous episode, more Americans have an Amazon Prime account than own a gun or put up a Christmas tree or go to church. If you look at Amazon Prime customers, Amazon obviously knows all of their data, what their purchasing habits are, what they're interested in, how frequently you buy something, how often you impulse buy, all this type of stuff. So the idea that Amazon have in terms of zero-click ordering is that once a month or whatever the buying pattern is going to be, they will send you a box of stuff, essentially. They'll take it straight out of your account, and then you just put the rest of the stuff that you don't want back in the box, and someone takes it away. If it's not there, they just discount it from your Amazon Prime account. So again, the fact that it's kind of a death of brand in many ways, and almost a death of marketing as well, and advertising, because if you're now just being given product because this is what you want. Why
have you any need to go shopping then?
Exactly. Do you know what I mean? And again, it's not, look, this isn't going to be mass market, mass scale. Again, it's up there with the fucking delivery drones and stuff like that. Like, I mean, if you listen to Jeff Bezos a number of years ago, everything was going to be delivered by a drone. Like, do you know what I mean? Again, it's one of those technologies that we don't know how mature it's going to get, but it's just a little insight into how the world could be changing, particularly now. I mean, okay, I'm not saying that COVID is going to go on forever, but can you imagine a COVID world where, or another pandemic, for example, where we don't necessarily, or we don't go shopping as often, and you want again that dopamine hit? The idea of going out and getting something, the same way that people get a dopamine hit from window shopping, getting a box to your house, and it's almost that surprise element of what did I get this month based on what my search patterns or my previous buying behaviours are. And again, in the COVID world, that could be very, very powerful. When again, people have more money to spend, more inclined to impulse buy, but they also can't go out as much, essentially. So again, it's just an interesting thought more so than anything else.
As you're saying, like, that kind of subscription model is definitely very interesting. I suppose looking back even to the way it's transformed over the last few years, is people who have signed up for, say, maybe, you know, you would have had your magazine subscription, you know, your you know, and that transformed then into your emails. You know, you're getting your subscription online onto the tablet, and now, as you said, like, you know, you're kind of maybe buying a package, or you're getting involved in a package online that's giving a few brands into your household. Yeah,
exactly. No, it's powerful, really. And again, everything being driven by data, realistically.
So I suppose, like, we kind of talked a lot about data and technology and the way maybe even some of the big companies are doing it. Do you feel there's that in maybe some of our listeners, in terms of business owners or marketers, maybe something that they could start looking at that might be changing coming down the line?
Well, in terms of the creative element, I suppose, more so than anything else, because again, we've spoken about the tech and the analytics and all that kind of stuff, but it's something, and at the moment it's going to be probably more for corporates, building corporate brands, but it's going to become more important for SMEs as well, is how different users are consuming different types of content. There's a kind of a fallacy out there amongst a lot of people, and I'm not entirely sure where it's come from. It goes back to the humans only have a 3-second attention, like a goldfish and all this kind of nonsense. Whereby people will advise businesses that, when you're building branded content, it should only be like 10 seconds long, or at most 30 seconds long, or whatever the case may be. Now, there has been a big rebirth of that since stories, particularly advertising in stories. Exactly. But what that should always lead into, and what I find will be a big play for a lot of brands into the future, is going to be long form content. If you look at the data in the United States, I think it's something insane. 30% of all internet traffic goes through Netflix in terms of the amount of traffic that goes in relative to other competing brands. Not that many shows on Netflix which are only 10 seconds and 30 seconds long. No. So people do binge content, and it's long form content. And if you can create content which is directly aligned with a consumer's kind of entertainment purposes, then all of a sudden they're going to be engrossed in your brand. Can you imagine, like we say, it's powerful if someone even clicks on your story. Can you imagine how powerful a piece of content would be if someone sat down on Netflix and was looking at a piece of content for 20, 30, 40 minutes, an hour, or they were binging a series, and throughout that series your brand was sprinkled throughout of it, or it was totally about your brand if there was a kind of a documentary or something along those kind of lines. I think that could be really, really interesting.
But I think it's definitely changed, and even in terms of, like, I'm definitely I love long form content and creating that longer piece of video in particular. But I think the society has changed, especially in the last few months, because they're sitting at home. So they're it's probably more powerful at the moment because they have a little bit more time to consume your content. So yes, you have only a couple of seconds maybe to grab their attention. But I think when people know they're getting into watching a long form content, they will watch it as long as it's interesting, obviously. But I think you have a couple of seconds definitely to grab their attention. But once they know they're going to consume a bit of content that's going to be long form, I think they have no problem.
There's massive opportunity. No, there's massive opportunities there. And again, the attention bit is important. Like again, we've always said content needs to be thumb stopping.
Yeah.
You need to be aware that the content exists, but don't be afraid of long term content. Again, this idea, this fallacy that everything needs to be short just simply isn't true. Like you said, even if you take my own behaviour at the moment, for example, did I always listen to podcasts? Yeah, I did. But if I was, we say, in the university, for example, and I was going for lunch with people, of course we can't do that anymore, then I'd be talking to people. Whereas now if I'm cooking at home, I'll probably have a podcast on. So there's more time for me to consume that long form content, many of which can be branded content as well. So again, podcasts, mini documentaries on YouTube for multinational brands. I think documentaries are going to be a huge thing. Like the best piece of marketing content for Nike, I'd say, like almost ever, was The Last Dance documentary on Netflix about Michael Jordan. And it was all about, okay, there was very little of it about actual Nike, but to have a symbol like him and Nike just plastered throughout the whole documentary, kind of not reinvigorated, because Nike is an incredibly strong brand, but again, it brought back that kind of nostalgic feeling of why Nike are Nike and the previous associations that they would have had with celebrities like Michael Jordan. So again, that long form piece, I think, is going to be incredibly important. Like to give one example, and brands have always great ideas, but they don't necessarily know how to communicate them. So I always had this idea. A number of years ago, there was a Marketing Institute event, and the CEO of Volvo was there. And Volvo had this thing called Vision 2020, which is when they made a commitment that nobody would be seriously injured or die in a crash involving a Volvo. And I was kind of going, this is an incredible statement to make. Like this is what brands should be doing, an incredibly powerful message that they be sending out to our consumers. That message that we will guarantee you that no one will be seriously injured or die in a car crash.
It's not a sales pitch, it's a we care about
it's
our
a
customers.
mission, it's a mission, it's a vision, it's something that you could back and you can stand by, or your engineers can buy into. And we won't go into it now, but Volvo do a huge amount of work in Sweden in terms of safety and all the rest of it. But I'd never heard about this as a marketer and as someone who teaches marketing, and I'd never heard of it before, and I was like, how haven't I heard about this? And it wasn't ever communicated anywhere. There was one television ad which I saw, and it was a good television ad, but again, it was a television ad. What would have been amazing for Volvo to do would be do a documentary, Netflix style, on what I would call like the anatomy of a crash. And then it's almost like those old airline crashes or investigations kind of shows. They show the anatomy of how something actually how something actually unfurled. And as there is about to be a crash, by the end of the show, the crash doesn't actually happen, but it shows the development in the technology, from seat belts to your LiDAR technology, all this stuff that's been built into the car and created by Volvo over a number of years. That would be really, really interesting for petrol heads and car nerds, and it would really, really show the mission in its real actual form in a documentary. You can't communicate that sort of commitment over just a 30-second TV ad. So again, when brands are doing incredible things, they should be creating the content and promoting it in that long form content. Now obviously, again, to grab the attention, you have to do your stories and all the rest of it, but again, I didn't see them doing that, and that's kind of disappointing for something which is such a critical idea. No,
I totally agree. I think another thing that stems on probably from what you're talking about there is, from an advertising point of view, and maybe for buying ads and buying or placing your logo in places you probably never thought about before, is sponsoring or taking out an advert in these long form contents, or we're not looking for sponsors now, but sponsoring podcasts.
No, we're remaining independent. No one is sponsoring this. I mentioned Hugo Boss was created by the Nazis earlier on. No one is sponsoring this.
Guinness
podcast
might take us on.
Guinness might take us on, yeah.
But I think looking at these kind of long form contents, whether sponsoring videos or whether it's as you said, creating longer form videos to tell your brand story, sponsoring podcasts, looking at where people's attention are now. It's not anymore not as much as it is still, but not as much as it was in terms of print and maybe on air radio adverts. But looking at where people's attentions are and seeing, can you get your logo in there somewhere, or your products or your links to your e-commerce, where can you put your logo,
and in a meaningful way that it's not intrusive. One of the most powerful forms of digital advertising is native, where it just kind of seamless. It almost seems when you're reading an article that the ad is part of the article almost, or they slip in something in the article. But again, that's the most effective. It's very natural. It's not interrupting the consumer experience. And again, you're going to see a lot more of that, where branding and marketing and advertising needs to be a bit more subtle. Because I think now, again, in a world of Spotify, Netflix and Amazon Prime, you just turn your ads off.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think, look, we'll finish it up there, and thanks for listening to another episode of us waffling on about something that we think we know about, I suppose.
Yeah. Why not?
Why not? Thanks again, everyone. If you need any advice or help, especially over the next coming weeks.
Hang on there now before you finish.
What?
No. You know what next week is? What? The election. American election. We get to talk about politics and marketing. I can't wait.
And a certain fella.
I can't wait for it. It's the only reason that I made this podcast is over after that.
You knew the election was coming up.
That's it, yeah, exactly.
Well, look, we'll definitely talk about that next week. And as I said, get in touch with us if we can do anything for you. And thanks very much. Good luck.
Good luck.